Hey guys, tonight we step into misty rice fields, rattling armor, and a world where you don't own your life. Your lord does. You stand in the pre-dawn haze of a rural Japanese village, the scent of damp earth and ash clinging to your worn kimono. A rooster crows somewhere distant, as your bare feet press into the cold dirt outside your family's cramped, smoky home. You stretch and immediately regret it, because the straw mat you slept on has done nothing for your spine. Welcome to feudal Japan, a place of discipline, structure, and let's be honest, a whole lot of suffering. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and the local time in the comments. I'd love to see where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's the late 1500s. You live in a world controlled not by nations but by power pyramids. At the top, the emperor, a ceremonial figurehead, the shogun, the actual ruler, and beneath him, daimyo warlords who command their own armies of samurai. You, however, are much, much farther down. You're a peasant, or heimin, literally common folk. And your life? It's mostly about rice, taxes, and not annoying the people with swords. You don't choose your station. You're born into it. If your parents are farmers, you're a farmer. If they're artisans, you become one too. Social mobility exists. In theory, but in practice, it's about as likely as you becoming a ninja overnight. Which, spoiler alert, you won't. The house you're born into is more of a suggestion than a structure. Thin wooden walls, a straw roof, one room for everyone. It's drafty in winter, steamy in summer, and perpetually smells like smoke, sweat, and pickled vegetables. You're swaddled in cloth scraps as a baby, strapped to your mother's back, while she harvests rice and weaned on miso soup and crushed barley. And here's your first daily challenge: surviving infancy. Child mortality rates are heartbreakingly high. There's no modern medicine, no vaccines, no pediatricians. If you make it to 5 years old, congratulations, you've already beaten the odds. Your father doesn't say much, because showing emotion isn't really a thing here. If you cry too much, someone might literally shout that you're inviting evil spirits. So you learn fast to stay quiet, stay small, and stay useful. Around the time you can walk straight and hold a broom, your chores begin. You carry firewood, wash vegetables, and help chase away birds that peck at the millet. School? Not unless you're a noble, or a boy lucky enough to be taken in by a local monk for temple training. And if you are that boy, you're more likely to spend your days copying sutras than discovering algebra. But hey, let's talk names. You don't really have a fixed last name unless you're high-ranking. The family name isn't a big deal at your level. If anything, you're so-and-so from that village by the river. Your identity is rooted in location and labor. You are effectively a rice-producing coordinate. Now let's pause for a quick fringe fact. Some villages had little guardian statues of Jizo, the Buddhist protector of children and travelers, tucked into corners to keep kids like you safe. You might even tie a red bib around one during festivals, hoping it helps you avoid dysentery. Historians still argue whether the rigid class system we associate with feudal Japan, especially during the Tokugawa era, was as airtight as we imagine. Some records suggest a little wiggle room, especially in chaotic wartime. But don't get your hopes up. You are very much expected to stay in your assigned box. So what do you eat? Mostly rice. If your harvest is good, millet and barley fill the gaps. You might get miso soup, a few pickles, maybe some dried fish if you're lucky or live near the coast. Everything's seasonal, and if there's a bad harvest, you might go days eating tree bark and boiled roots. Salt is precious. Sugar is mythical. Clothing? You wear what your mother stitched from hemp or cotton. It's functional, it itches, and you patch it 100 times before you get a new set. Shoes? Sandals made of straw. Socks? If you have them, you guard them with your life. Entertainment? You're funny. On special occasions, there might be a storyteller who wanders through your village, or a puppet show if you're lucky. But most nights, You fall asleep to the sound of crickets and the creak of your neighbour's wheezing ox. Let's talk weather. You live in a country of extremes, sweltering, muggy summers and bitter winters that cut through your thin walls like a katana. When it rains, it pours. When it snows, your ceiling leaks. Umbrellas exist, but they're made of oiled paper and break if you so much as glare at them wrong. Your worldview is shaped by Buddhism, Shinto, and a constant fear of kami, nature, spirits. You say quiet prayers at the family altar, leave offerings for ancestors, and never, ever whistle at night, unless you want to invite snakes, or worse. Oh, and gender. If you're born a girl, life's even more restricted. You learn to be quiet, graceful, obedient, and then help your mother with all the work. You're promised to someone before you hit puberty, and unlike the handful of upper-class women who wrote poetry or practiced calligraphy, your artistic expression is mostly limited to arranging pickles and folding laundry neatly. Now, let's not pretend there aren't tiny moments of beauty. The spring blossoms are stunning. The village festivals, rare as they are, offer colour and music and laughter. And sometimes, when the moon's high and the rice fields glow silver, you sit by your family's fire and feel, for just a breath, like the world might not swallow you whole. Then someone coughs blood, the ox breaks its leg, or a tax collector shows up 2 weeks early. Back to reality. So this is your beginning, born into a fragile body, in a fragile house, in a system so finely tuned that the slightest deviation invites punishment or starvation. You are quiet. You are small. And every breath is a balancing act between fear and obedience. But hey, at least you don't have to worry about emails, right? You arrive as a peasant baby, hungry, cold, and already in debt to your local daimyo. The moment you're born, the midwife wraps you in worn cotton cloth and mutters a quiet prayer. Not a celebration, just a hope that you live long enough to matter. You squall in a room with no privacy, no sterile equipment, and absolutely no anesthesia for your mother, who's expected to resume her usual chores before her body fully remembers how to stand upright. From the first breath, your life is already in the red. Your parents owe rice tax to the local daimyo, the regional warlord, who in turn answers to the shogunate above him. That tax burden, it doesn't get reduced because they had a baby. If anything, congratulations, now they have one more mouth to feed. You come into the world with negative net worth, a grim little bundle of debt and obligation. And here's your first lesson. Your birth isn't really about you. It's about the clan. Your family hopes you'll grow up strong enough to plow, plant, and carry buckets of water. If you're a boy, maybe they'll let you dream about temple schooling. If you're a girl, well, better start learning how to kneel properly and pickle things. Childhood in feudal Japan isn't cushioned by toys or cartoons. Your crib is a woven basket, if anything. Your toys, pebbles, sticks. If your family is lucky, maybe you get a hand-me-down wooden rattle carved by a great-uncle. But most of your early life is about learning not to be a burden. Cry too much, and you'll hear your grandmother tell your mother to tie that one up outside and see if the fox spirits take it. That's probably a joke, probably. Fringe fact break. Some regions practiced ubasuit, the rumoured act of abandoning elderly or infirm relatives on a mountainside during times of famine. Historians still argue whether this was a real custom or just a haunting legend used to dramatise the desperation of rural life. Either way, you grow up knowing your value is directly linked to how useful you are. By the age of 3, you're carrying small bundles of kindling. By 5, you're helping plant seedlings. Schooling? Not unless your village has a compassionate monk willing to teach the basics of reading and Buddhist scripture. Even then, boys get priority, and girls are often told that knowing too much will scare off future husbands. Your family doesn't own the land, it leases it from the daimyo's estate, and every season your father kneels before a tax collector, presenting sacks of rice like offerings to a god. If the harvest is bad, too bad. The tax doesn't change. It's fixed, immovable, and utterly indifferent to your suffering. Ever wonder what your social rank is? Let's break it down. Samurai, the elite warrior class, technically not even allowed to touch farming tools. They're busy writing poetry and, occasionally, lopping off heads. Peasants, that's you, the backbone of the nation, and also the most overworked. Artisans, blacksmiths, carpenters, weavers, skilled but still poor. Merchants, weirdly the lowest, because they just move money around, even though they often end up richer than everyone else. Social loophole, anyone. You're told that peasants are honorable, the foundation of the nation. But honor doesn't patch your sandals or keep your roof from leaking. You start to learn early that the official narrative is one thing. Daily reality, something else entirely. By the time you can walk without tripping over your own feet, you've internalized a hierarchy so rigid it may as well be carved into bamboo. You greet elders with deep bows. You never speak unless spoken to. You keep your eyes down and your mouth shut. Not because anyone told you directly, but because you watched what happened when someone didn't. Another mainstream historical truth. Feudal Japanese villages were deeply communal. Everyone knew everyone. That sounds cozy until you realize it means you have exactly zero privacy. Your missteps become gossip within hours. If your mother cried last night, if your older brother stumbled home drunk on stolen plum wine, everyone knows, and judgment comes fast. You're raised on a diet of rice, when it's available, fermented vegetables, and stoicism. Fall and spring are for farming. Winter is for mending tools, patching clothes, and shivering next to the family fire pit. Summer, a haze of sweat, mosquitoes, and praying the floods don't wash out your crops. Now, let's gently fold in a debate point. Historians still argue whether early childhood in feudal Japan was truly as harsh as records suggest, or if some regions allowed for a little more warmth and joy, especially during festivals and seasonal rituals. Maybe your grandmother did sneak you an extra rice ball under the moonlight. Maybe you even laughed once without getting scolded. But those moments, fleeting. Back to your normal day. You wake before sunrise. No alarm clock needed. The rooster, your father's cough, and the cold do the job just fine. You're sent to gather water, mind your younger siblings, and scare the sparrows off the fields. And when you're not actively helping, you're watching. Watching how to repair thatch, how to fold clothes, how to stay invisible when tempers rise. If you're a girl, you're already learning how to walk with your head slightly bowed. If you're a boy, you're being taught to carry yourself with modest strength, just enough to show you'll be a good worker, not enough to seem proud. Pride is dangerous. Pride gets you noticed, and being noticed is rarely good. Your parents don't praise you much. It's not that they don't care, it's just not the culture. Love is expressed through actions. A thicker futon in winter, an extra pickled plum in your rice bowl. Quiet things. The idea of telling a child, "I'm proud of you," that's a modern luxury, and you wouldn't recognize it if you heard it. In fact, the biggest compliment you might ever get is, "You don't cause trouble." And that's your childhood goal. Be useful, be invisible, stay alive. Try to grow strong enough to survive planting season. Because the truth is, you were born into a machine that doesn't stop turning, no matter who gets caught in its gears. But don't worry, you're doing great. For someone who's 5 and already behind on rice payments, you wake up with a jolt because you didn't sleep well. Again. The straw mat beneath you is lumpy, the fire burned out sometime during the night, and you can hear the wind scraping dry leaves against the walls of your one-room home. It's not even dawn yet, but your day's already begun. There's no such thing as sleeping in when you're a peasant in feudal Japan. Time is a seasonal concept, dictated by the sun, not by comfort. You rise when the light does, if not earlier. The rooster crowing isn't a charming background sound, it's basically your alarm clock and your boss rolled into one. First stop, the fire pit. You crouch beside the ashes and try to coax the embers back to life. Your fingers are stiff, your breath fogs in the cold, and your mother is already slicing dried radish for breakfast behind you, barely speaking. No one's cranky. This is just what mornings feel like. Quiet, sparse, functional. You slurp a hot bowl of thin rice porridge, maybe with a few wilted greens or fermented vegetables stirred in. No spices, no coffee, just warm, bland fuel. Your chopsticks are worn smooth, and you've probably used the same pair since you were 6. Breakfast takes 5 minutes. If you're slow, someone will remind you, gently but firmly, that the sun doesn't wait. Then it's out to the fields. You grab your woven straw sandals, check the rope bindings, and head out with the rest of your family. You carry buckets, bundles of tools or seedlings depending on the season. The fields are soggy from morning dew, your feet sink into the mud, and the work begins in silence. Here's your reality. You are part of a well-oiled, bone-tired agricultural machine. Every able body is part of the labor. Men, women, kids who can walk straight. Planting, weeding, watering, and harvesting happen in endless loops. You know which season it is by the pain in your back and the color of the rice shoots. Mainstream historical fact. Rice was not just a food staple, it was currency. Taxes were paid in rice. Samurai were often paid in rice. Daimyo measured their wealth in koku, a unit roughly equivalent to the amount of rice needed to feed one person for a year. You, though, you're trying to avoid going hungry next week. Water's critical to rice, so irrigation is sacred. Channels have to be maintained, watched, defended from floods. Lose the water, and you lose the crop. Lose the crop, and, well, you already know how that ends. And yes, you farm in the rain. You farm in the heat. You farm in the cold. You farm when you're sick, tired, injured, or grieving. Your obligations don't clock out. Let's zoom in on one particularly quirky detail. You occasionally smear ashes or crushed oyster shells onto your fields as fertilizer. It smells like death, but it works. Human waste, animal dung, even fermented fish paste, all part of your farming toolkit. You've got a compost pile that could make a modern gardener cry. Historians still argue whether farming families had much time for leisure during the feudal era. Some believe festivals and rest days offered periodic relief. Others suggest the labor demand was so relentless, those rest days were mostly symbolic, like putting a paper umbrella over a wildfire. But for you, downtime is a luxury. Maybe after a day of weeding, you sit under a persimmon tree and share a roasted yam with your brother. Maybe there's a traveling peddler in the village selling sweetened rice cakes, and your mother gives you a coin from her sleeve. Those are good days. Rare, but they sparkle in your memory. The rest? Well, let's just say your shoulders ache even when you're asleep. By midday, your hands are blistered and your face is streaked with sweat and dust. You take a break, sit on an upturned bucket, and sip tepid water from a gourd. Your lunch is leftover rice pressed into balls, maybe wrapped in pickled leaves. If you're lucky, you chew slowly because you're not sure how long until dinner. Your eyes scan the horizon for signs of clouds because a storm can undo weeks of planting. You're always watching the sky, always calculating how many hours of light are left. Because if the work isn't finished before sunset, there's no second shift. You don't own lamps. Oil's expensive. Darkness is your cutoff. Late afternoon rolls in, and your body is begging you to stop. But your father's still moving, and your mother hasn't flinched, so neither do you. If a samurai rode past right now, you'd have to bow immediately. Drop what you're doing, fall to your knees, eyes down. That's the law. Not bowing could get you punished or worse. You hear stories of peasants being struck by bored samurai, just for walking in the wrong spot. That's not myth, that's documented. And there's no recourse. The law doesn't bend for your kind. Your protection is your invisibility. The sun finally dips, and your workday ends not with relief, but with the knowledge that tomorrow is identical. You trudge home, sore, sunburned, and somehow still muddy in places you didn't know existed. Back at the house, your younger siblings are sorting soybeans by candlelight, and your mother's stirring a pot of miso soup. Dinner is plain, but hot. That's enough. You eat silently, then share a single sour plum between all of you. It's less about taste and more about ritual. A tart punctuation mark at the end of the day. After dinner, there's no Netflix, No books. Maybe a neighbor stops by to exchange weather gossip, or your father carves a replacement handle for a broken hoe. You sit near the fire, watching shadows flicker on the wall. The smoke from the hearth coats the ceiling, giving the air a constant, woody haze. You cough sometimes, but so does everyone else. You barely notice anymore. A brief side note. Your house probably doesn't have a proper chimney. Smoke just kind of drifts upward and sideways and everywhere. There's a hole in the roof to let some of it out. But mostly, your lungs are as seasoned as a campfire grill. When it's time for bed, you lie on the same mat you woke up on. You stretch your arms, feel the pull in your shoulders, and roll onto your side. Someone's snoring already. Maybe your younger sibling mumbles in their sleep. The night insects begin their chorus outside. No clocks, no worries about time zones. Just a slow, rhythmic ache in your back, and the knowledge that you'll wake up and do it all again. Still, you fall asleep. Not because you're relaxed, but because you have no energy left to be awake. Morning comes again. Soft grey light. A chill draft slipping under the wall mat, and the usual rooster announcing your unpaid internship in survival. But this time, something different. You're not headed to the fields. Today, you're going to the castle. Well, not into the castle. You're not that special. But the daimyo's estate is calling, and your family has business. Specifically, your father owes tax, or tribute, or labor, probably all three. And since you're old enough to walk and keep your mouth shut, you're coming along. Think of it like a very boring school field trip, with a real possibility of corporal punishment. You tighten your faded headcloth, take a half-finished rice ball in a cloth wrap, and start walking. The estate is several miles away, a slow trudge along a narrow dirt road, flanked by farmland and tangled underbrush. You pass other villagers, heading the same way, some with bundles of firewood, others balancing baskets of pickled vegetables, straw mats, or chickens. Everyone's hauling something, no one's smiling. The air is damp and earthy. Your sandals are already coated in morning dew. Somewhere in the trees, a cuckoo calls. And all the while, you try not to look anxious, though your stomach is clenched. Let's get you familiar with the local power structure. At the top of your immediate world is the daimyo, a regional lord granted authority by the shogun himself. His job is to manage the land, collect taxes, and maintain order, and, in theory, provide protection. Under him are his retainers, advisors, and a small army of samurai. These men aren't just warriors, they're administrators, enforcers, sometimes even local judges. Mainstream fact: Japan's feudal era was shaped by the shogunate system, a military government where real power was held by the shogun rather than the emperor. The emperor still existed, often more as a ceremonial figure, tucked away in Kyoto, while the shogunate operated from wherever the ruling clan, Minamoto, Ashikaga, or Tokugawa, set up shop. Back to your march. As you approach the outer edge of the daimyo's estate, you start noticing things. Cleaner paths, tighter fences, rice fields that look suspiciously healthier than yours. Coincidence? Probably not. Local labor often gets borrowed for estate upkeep, and guess who provides it? You pass under a simple wooden gate, watched by two samurai standing statue straight. Their armor is lacquered, their swords are real, and their eyes track you like cats watching a mouse too bold for its own good. You bow, deeply, maybe too deeply. One of them grunts. You keep walking. The daimyo's estate isn't a fairy tale castle. Think less towering fortress, and more large compound with layered walls, a courtyard, and a central residence built with sliding paper doors and polished wooden floors. There's a pond with koi, a well-kept garden. You're here to remind him he owns you, basically. You wait in a line with other villagers, each taking turns to kneel and present their tribute: rice, cloth, tools, sometimes even handcrafted goods or seasonal produce. Your father unshoulders his sack of rice and bows, holding the bundle out with both hands. The retainer, inspecting the goods, makes no comment. That's good. No comment means it's acceptable. A minor retainer asks your father to step aside for a moment. Your heart skips. But no punishment comes. Just a request for an extra day of labor next week to help with roof repairs at a nearby garrison. Your father bows again, lower this time. "Hi," he says softly. No one says no to a daimyo. Here's the quirky part. Sometimes, daimyo imposed odd or inconsistent tributes based on their preferences or personal rituals. One historical record suggests a regional lord demanded bundles of lavender-scented rushes as part of midsummer taxes, purely because he liked the way they smelled when burned. Power is a strange spice. Once people have it, they season everything. You're too low on the ladder to speak directly to the daimyo, but you do catch a glimpse of him through a partially opened shoji screen. He's seated, flanked by retainers, sipping tea with exquisite disinterest. His robes shimmer faintly with expensive silk threads. You've never seen cloth like that up close before. It makes you feel like a piece of furniture. Historians still argue whether daimyo governance was tyrannical or merely bureaucratic. Some accounts describe ruthless crackdowns, harsh punishments, even executions for minor disobedience. Others point to records of lords who genuinely invested in their regions, building canals, funding temple schools, even issuing disaster relief or during famines. Like most systems built on hierarchy, your experience depends entirely on the man at the top, and luck. After the tribute, you're allowed a few minutes to rest in a waiting area. A low wooden bench near the servants' quarters. You eat the rest of your rice ball. It's gone in 3 bites. Around you, peasants murmur softly, heads low, like even their voices might be taxed. You overhear one man whisper about someone being flogged last week for stealing an eel from a noble's pond. Another talks about a wandering monk who passed through a nearby village, preaching about karma and impermanence. Some say he was arrested. Others say he vanished into the forest like a ghost. A retainer calls your father's name. Time to go. As you leave the estate, you pass a training yard where young samurai are sparring with wooden swords. The clack of wood on wood is rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Their robes are clean, their hair tied back in neat top knots. You're not jealous exactly, but you can't help but wonder what it's like to grow up knowing you're allowed to carry a weapon, that you matter on paper, that your birth came with options. You walk home as the sun dips low. Your father says little, but he looks tired in a different way now. Like a man who keeps making payments on a house he'll never see the deed to. Once home, your mother asks if the rice was accepted. He nods. She exhales through her nose. Dinner's already simmering. Some root vegetable stew with bitter greens. No one talks about the daimyo. You eat in silence again. Later, curled up. On your straw mat, you picture the silk robe, the koi pond, the sparring yard. Then you remember the man who was flogged for stealing an eel. You close your eyes, the weight of hierarchy still pressing against your chest. Tomorrow, it's back to the fields. It's dark again, morning still curled up somewhere beneath the horizon. But this time, you're not waking up to mud and millet. You're waking up to the shrill echo of drums, the kind that mean trouble. The village elder is already at your door. He doesn't knock. He just calls your father's name and mutters, "Bandits again, Western Road." You've heard about this before. Small-time raiders, maybe desperate ronin, maybe peasants turned, outlaw. They strike at night, steal rice, torch a shed, vanish into the trees. But this time, someone saw them. That means someone has to report it. Your father wraps a cloth sash around his waist, grabs a worn walking stick, and steps outside with a sigh like he's about to face bad weather. Not bandits. You follow, because you're old enough to be silent and small, which is basically a form of currency in moments like this. You walk toward the village shrine, where a few other men have gathered. Tense murmurs pass back and forth. One woman sobs quietly. Her food stores were taken. She has a baby. Everyone knows what that means. Eventually, a messenger is chosen. One of the younger men. He's given a charcoal-scrawled letter and told to walk to the daimyo's estate. No horse, no guards. Just his legs, and the hope he doesn't run into the very bandits he's trying to report. It's not thrilling, it's terrifying. Now let's talk about law and order in feudal Japan. Because you might be thinking, shouldn't there be police? Technically, yes, but not in the way you'd hope. Mainstream historical fact. During the Edo period, law enforcement was largely carried out by low-ranking samurai, known as yoriki and doshin. These officials handled local disturbances, investigations, and arrests, at least in theory. But villages far from urban centers, you were lucky if anyone showed up. If your town was too small to have a permanent doshin, justice became a DIY project. By midday, the messenger is gone. A few villagers stand guard at the road's edge with tools repurposed into makeshift weapons. Your uncle sharpens a sickle. You're handed a bamboo pole, not to fight with, but to use as a lookout perch. Climb a tree, watch the road, shout, if you see movement. Let's pause for a second and acknowledge something awkward. Bandits weren't always the villains. In fact, historians still argue whether peasant bandits were just criminals, or resistance fighters reacting to brutal taxation. Some records paint them as violent marauders. Others hint they were desperate farmers turned rebels, stealing back what had been taken from them. You've probably heard a few heroic bandit stories from traveling monks or firelit whispers. Outlaws who robbed from the rich, fed the poor, vanished before the samurai could blink. Romantic, sure. But you also know someone who lost a barn to them, so it's hard to cheer too loudly. That night, guards are doubled. The village gate, more of a wide swing plank than a real barrier, is watched by 3 tired men with spears made from broom handles. You stay close to home, listen for strange footsteps, try not to blink too fast. There's a story going around that a neighboring village caught a thief, tied him to a tree, and waited for the samurai. 3 days later, he was gone. No sign of a struggle. Just rope fibers and muddy footprints leading nowhere. The idea of justice is starting to feel a lot like the idea of snow in summer. Technically possible, but deeply unrealistic. And here's your quirky fact of the day. In some villages, night watch roles rotated based on zodiac years. That's right. If you were born in the year of the rooster, congratulations. You get to patrol during spring. It wasn't very effective, but it gave people something to blame besides fate. Your family doesn't sleep much. You lie on your mat, eyes open, watching the flickering fire shadows crawl along the ceiling. Your mother keeps a knife tucked under her blanket. It's probably never been used, but tonight it makes her breathe easier. No bandits come that night, or the next. But the air stays heavy. Suspicion thickens like smoke. Someone accuses a neighbor of helping the raiders. Maybe he left his grain store unlocked. Maybe he looked too calm. Maybe people just need someone to hate when the system fails them. Eventually, a few samurai do show up. 3 of them, mounted, lacquered armor polished to a gleam. They speak with the elder, frown dramatically, inspect the burnt storage hut, and ride off before sundown. Their solution: double patrols, stay vigilant. You're left to your sharpened rakes and your bad dreams. Historians still debate how seriously local governments took rural crime. Some evidence shows that even serious incidents like murder or organized theft were ignored if they didn't threaten tax revenue. The message was clear: protect the harvest. Everything else was optional. So here you are, in a village that's technically under protection, but practically alone. Your little brother asks what happens if the bandits come again. Your mother says, "We pray they don't." You go to bed that night listening for footsteps that never arrive, hugging the silence tighter than a blanket. And when morning comes, it's back to the fields. Because fear is a luxury you don't really have time for. The sun is back again, rising behind a haze of mist that clings to the low hills like a lazy ghost. You stretch your legs and try to shake off the echo of bamboo flute music that drifted into your dreams. A tune played last night by the travelling entertainer who showed up unexpectedly. You'd nearly forgotten what laughter sounded like. He told jokes with his hands, spun stories about fox spirits and floating umbrellas. Your little brother asked him if spirits were real. The man just smiled and said, "Only when you forget to thank your rice." Anyway, you're not thinking about foxes today. You're thinking about taxes. Again. You're going to learn that taxes in feudal Japan were not simple lines on a form. They were air, water, and time itself. They came in many flavors: rice, labor, rice again, fabric, fish, timber, and sometimes just your body doing someone else's job. And if you ever thought they had a due date, well, no. They had moods. Mainstream fact: in much of feudal Japan, tax was calculated in koku. The amount of rice needed to feed one person for a year, about kilograms. Daimyo were ranked not by land size, but by how many koku their domains produced annually. That number? It controlled everything. Status, influence, military power. Your village is supposed to produce maybe koku this year. But here's the twist. That's assuming perfect harvests, 0 rats, no floods, and immaculate cooperation from a workforce whose backs ache before the sun is even up. Spoiler. That never happens. So what do the officials do? They fudge the numbers, or they pressure the village elder to encourage everyone to offer more rice in the spirit of loyalty. It's a nice way of saying, give more, or you'll regret it. You remember last year's lean harvest? Your family cut meals in half for 2 months just so your father wouldn't show up empty-handed. You watched your mother boil old pickled roots to stretch out the meals. You can still taste the sour sting on your tongue. Today, a tax officer is visiting again. Not the daimyo himself, obviously. This one's a mid-level kanjo bugyo, a tax administrator. He wears clean robes, keeps his sleeves tucked just so, and smells faintly of sandalwood and ink. His job is to walk the rice fields, inspect the yield, and decide how much your village owes. Historians still argue whether these tax officers were corrupt bureaucrats or simply scapegoats for a failing system. Some were honest, some took bribes, some probably didn't know how rice even worked and were just copying numbers from the guy before them. Your job today is to help carry baskets and stay quiet. You trail behind your father and the officer as they walk the edge of the paddies. The man squints at the golden stalks, jots a note, and mutters something about pest damage. Your father doesn't flinch. Pest damage could mean a tax increase. They assume you didn't guard the crop properly. Quirky tidbit. In some records, villages tried to trick tax collectors by replanting stalks in higher concentrations along the roadside, where inspections took place. The goal was to create the illusion of a healthier crop. The practice was so common that some officials began carrying long poles to probe for depth. Turns out, even feudal bureaucracy needed a little poke. The officer stops and frowns at a half-sunken patch of rice, flooded from last week's rain. He clicks his tongue, then scratches out something in his ledger. Your father swallows. Later, back at the village storehouse, the grain is weighed. There's a scale, simple, with wooden arms and iron weights. You watch the rice fall, slow and steady, into the measuring bin. The official watches like a hawk. One too many scoops, and someone might accuse you of skimming. Too few, and he'll say you're hiding grain. This is not about fairness. This is about precision theatre. He stamps his seal on the collection slip. Your village is now koku short of its annual obligation. The elder sighs. We'll make it up, he says. He's lying. Everyone knows it. Here's how that making up usually works. Labor conscription. If you can't pay in rice, you pay in work. Men are pulled from farms and sent to build bridges, dig roads, haul timber for castle repairs, or serve as porters for samurai on the move. It's like a national subscription service. The price, your body. Cancellation, not an option. You walk, home with your father, who says nothing for most of the way. Just before reaching the house, he mutters, "You'll carry for them next season, if they ask." You nod, though your stomach drops a little. In your world, adolescence is not a phase. It's a debt maturing. That night, the storehouse is locked up with thick rope and sealed with a wooden plank marked with ink. The rice inside isn't yours anymore. It belongs to the daimyo. It belongs to the system. You just raised it for someone else to eat. As your family eats its own modest meal, a thin porridge with hints of ginger, you glance at the pot and think about the bags of rice resting just 100 feet away, untouchable, guarded. And you think, not for the first time, that you're very, very tired of rice. Your hands are still sore from hauling baskets yesterday, and your legs ache in places you didn't know had nerves. But there's no sympathy in feudal Japan, not for sore joints or bruised pride. The sun doesn't wait, and neither does the work. Today, you're heading out to tend someone else's land, not as a favor, as an obligation. This is your first proper turn at corvée labor, a fancy way of saying unpaid, government-mandated drudgery. It's the tax you pay when your rice runs out and your luck runs thinner. Mainstream historical fact. During much of feudal Japan, commoners were required to contribute unpaid labor to public works projects. This system, known as yo or kofu, ensured the maintenance of roads, irrigation systems, castle repairs, and even construction of the daimyo's estates. It was incredibly common, especially when agricultural taxes fell short. You meet a group of 15 others at the roadside before dawn. No one talks. The silence is practical. Why waste energy on conversation when you'll be digging ditches? For 10 hours? The foreman, a broad-shouldered man with a voice like gravel, waves toward the tree line. Retaining wall collapsed by the stream, he says. Fix it by sundown. That's it. That's the briefing. There's no safety talk, no schedule, no lunch break bulletin. Just tools, battered shovels and picks, and a vague expectation that you'll know how to reconstruct water infrastructure because, well, someone has to. The stream is a winding trickle, recently swollen by storms. The wall, once made of layered stone, is now a mossy pile of potential tetanus. You're shown how to wedge rocks together without mortar, using the weight and shape of each stone to stabilize the next. It's a puzzle with no picture and no extra pieces. Someone jokes that it's like building a castle for frogs. No one laughs too hard. You work with your back bent like a question mark, your fingers caked in damp soil. Sweat stings your eyes, your shoulders hum with a dull, throbbing ache, and you're only 2 hours in. It doesn't take long for blisters to bloom. The guy next to you, Kenta, you think, wraps a strip of cloth around his hand, muttering about how it's his third corvée this season. Used to be once a year, he says. Now it's when convenient. For them, quirky tidbit. Some villages, rather than send able-bodied workers to corvée duties, would hire replacements, freelance laborers who did the job in exchange for food or coin. Think of them as gig workers of the 1600s. If your family was wealthy or desperate, you could pay someone to be sore on your behalf. Unfortunately, your family isn't wealthy, so here you are, stacking rocks like it's a spiritual ritual, except the only enlightenment you're reaching is the realization that you miss weeding your rice field. You miss weeding. Around midday, the foreman tosses everyone a rice ball. It's dry, salty, and tastes like regret, but you eat it quickly before the flies show up. You drink from a communal water gourd that smells faintly of bamboo and other people's breath. Historians still argue whether these corvée assignments were meant to instill civic pride or just squeeze extra value from a taxed-out peasantry. There's no easy answer. Some edicts framed them as honourable contributions to the community. Others read like threats. Either way, refusing wasn't an option. By afternoon, the group has restored about a third of the wall. It looks passable, if you squint and don't think about the next rain. A samurai rides by at one point, glancing at the work without slowing down. You wonder if he even knows what you're building. Maybe he doesn't care. Maybe he thinks peasants and stones are both meant to stay low and out of the way, as the sun droops westward, casting long golden shadows over the treetops. The foreman calls it. Enough for today. Come back tomorrow. We'll finish it. There's a groan, but no one argues. Arguing leads to punishments. Punishments lead to missing fingers. You've seen it before. You drag yourself home under a sky the colour of ironed plum skin. Every step a negotiation between your brain and your bones. At home, your mother pours you hot water with a bit of barley and dried mushroom. No meat tonight. Again. Your brother picks at his bowl and asks if you fought off wolves. You almost wish you had. It would have made the day feel useful. Later, you lie on your mat, too tired to shift positions, replaying the day in reverse. The rock you dropped on your toe, the moment you almost slipped into the stream, the samurai who didn't blink. And here's the kicker. You'll do it again, tomorrow. Not because you're strong, not because you're loyal, but because you have no say in the matter. Feudal Japan isn't interested in your personal comfort or existential reflections. It cares about ditches that drain, paths that don't flood, and keeping its elites dry while you stay wet. You finally fall asleep to the distant croaking of frogs, possibly enjoying their renovated castle. You're not sure whether to feel proud or deeply insulted. The stream wall holds. You check this morning, more out of spite than pride. After 2 full days of stacking, slipping, and accidentally swallowing gritty splash water, the wall has remained upright through a full night of drizzle. The frogs haven't thrown a party, but you imagine them bobbing their slick little heads in quiet approval. There's no applause, of course. You didn't build a palace. You repaired a bit of infrastructure that existed before your great-grandparents were born. But in feudal Japan, maintenance is the unsung rhythm of survival. Things fall apart. You fix them, then you fix them again. Today's assignment, though, is different. You've been called, along with 5 others, to help with castle maintenance. That's right. You're going inside the castle grounds. You'd be more excited if you hadn't heard the stories. Mainstream fact. Japanese castles weren't just military structures. They were political centers, status symbols, and administrative hubs. The daimyo's retainers, samurai officials, and accountants all operated inside these walls. And peasants? They entered only when needed and left with sore backs and heavy silence. The castle looms above the hill like a mountain decided to grow turrets. It isn't a fairy tale spire. It's layered, squat, and defensive. White plaster walls trimmed with dark timber, windows like narrow slits, and eaves that jut out like watchful eyebrows. As you approach, the air gets quieter. Even the birds seem hesitant to chirp near a place where power concentrates like storm clouds. At the outer gate, a guard squints at you. He has the kind of face that looks permanently unimpressed. He barely nods. No one asks your name. You're not a guest. You're a tool, a temporary part of the architecture. You're led through a maze of corridors and courtyards to a smaller outbuilding. This one houses armory supplies, spears, armor racks, and bundles of arrows in tidy rows. It smells like oiled wood, dust, and just a hint of blood. Your job is to clean. Not the exciting kind of cleaning, no polishing swords or inspecting secrets. You're sweeping, quietly, thoroughly. Quirky tidbit. To maintain silence during castle cleaning, workers sometimes wore tied cloth over their sandals to soften their steps. It wasn't for stealth. It was out of respect. Walking too loudly near a daimyo's quarters was considered impolite, even dangerous. Today, you're barefoot, which is both respectful and cold. You try not to stare at the armor. Some of it's purely ceremonial. Lacquered red plates, gold emblems, terrifying, face masks with teeth like demons. Others are scratched and stained, clearly worn into battle. You wonder what kind of man fills that shape. The room supervisor, a thin man with eyebrows like wispy paintbrushes, tells you to dust without touching anything. Naturally, your sleeve brushes against a helmet within the hour. You hold your breath. Nothing happens. Historians still argue whether castles were more symbolic than strategic by the later Edo period. Many were built less for defense and more to display wealth and control. High walls and stone moats, sure, but also tea rooms, gardens, and carefully curated trees bent to look accidentally beautiful. You won't see the tea rooms today. You're ushered to the inner courtyard after lunch, pickled vegetables and millet, eaten in a tight corner without eye contact. In the courtyard, you're told to help prune trees. The supervisor explains that these aren't just trees, they're symbols. Their shapes reflect harmony. A crooked pine branch isn't a flaw, it's a lesson in asymmetry. You nod like you understand. You don't. You're holding shears designed for someone with smaller hands and much more knowledge of botany. The man training you says one sentence. You'll never forget. A branch cut wrong is like a peasant's lie, small but noticed. He smiles when he says it. You wish he hadn't. It takes the rest of the afternoon to prune 3 trees. Your back hates you, but your mind is busy. The castle, for all its power, feels hollow in a strange way. Rooms echo too loudly. People speak too softly. You get the sense that if the daimyo sneezed, someone 2 corridors over might faint from the responsibility. But the walls, thick, damp stone walls, whisper another story. They remind you that this isn't a place you belong. You're a visitor here only because your labor is cheaper than hiring skilled hands. As you leave, you pass a chamber with sliding doors slightly ajar. Inside, you glimpse a scroll painting on the wall, cranes flying over waves. There's a tea kettle, perfectly placed, and a tiny wooden shelf holding what looks like an incense burner. The scent floats toward you, earthy, calming, like the kind of peace you haven't felt in weeks. You don't pause. Pausing near a fire noble's quarters could be misread. And in this world, misreading is dangerous. Back outside the gate, the skies turned golden again. You blink at the sun. For a moment, the castle behind you doesn't seem so grand. It's just a big building filled with tired people pretending they aren't tired. On the way home, someone mutters, "Did you see the armor with the dent?" Another laughs, probably from falling off a horse. You don't join in. You're thinking about the trees, the branches, the way power shapes even the way a pine leans. At home, your mother asks how it went. You say, "I saw the castle." She nods, then hands you a bowl of soup that smells like dried sardines and onion. She doesn't ask for details, because in feudal Japan, visiting a castle as a peasant isn't an adventure. It's an asterisk in your week, a line between duties, a reminder that no matter how high the towers climb, your feet stay in the dirt. The rain woke you before the rooster could. Not a drizzle, a downpour. Roof rattling, path-swallowing rain that turns dirt to paste and footsteps to squelches. You huddle beneath the eaves of your home, watching muddy rivulets carve their own tiny rivers through the village. The bamboo fences lean under the weight of wet leaves. Someone's straw sandal floats past like a soggy little boat with nowhere to go. You'd think a day like this would mean rest. But no, not here. Not in feudal Japan, where weather is just another obstacle to be worked through, not worked around. You're off to market today. Mainstream fact. Periodic markets were a vital part of life in feudal Japan. While self-sufficient farming was the norm, local and regional markets, called ichi, allowed villages to trade, barter, and buy goods they couldn't produce. These gatherings were tightly regulated, taxed, and often centered around temple grounds or castle towns. The road is slick. Your basket, slung over your back, creaks with each step. It's loaded with dried mushrooms, woven rush mats, and 3 eggs carefully cradled in rice straw. You're not selling. You're trading. Money, if it changes hands at all, comes in small, worn copper coins. Most days, you leave poorer in coin, richer in essentials. The nearest market is an hour's walk, more if the paths are flooded. Today, of course, they are. You pass a monk chanting under a tree, rain soaking through his robe like he doesn't notice. Maybe he doesn't. Or maybe he just knows that drying off is someone else's problem. You arrive at the market dripping, your sleeves clinging to your arms. The smell hits first. Fish, miso, smoke, sweat, radishes, and mud. It's a pungent soup of humanity and necessity. Stalls lean under makeshift awnings, and sellers shout like the rain owes them money. A woman's trying to unload. Millet cakes next to a man who insists his pickled plums can cure melancholy. A child offers handmade paper charms for luck during floods. You raise an eyebrow at that one. He grins. You find your regular trading partner, an older woman with a gaze like a hawk and teeth stained from beetle. She inspects your mats, pokes the mushrooms, and gently jostles the eggs. 2 mats for 1 bar of salt, she says flatly. You try to haggle. She snorts, then swim home. You take the deal. Quirky tidbit. Salt was so valuable in some inland regions that it was used like currency. There were entire salt roads dedicated to moving it from coast to mountain towns. Some villages even had folk sayings like, "He sweats like salted fish," to describe someone nervous under trade pressure. You pick up other things too. A strip of dried squid, a spool of thread, some miso paste that smells stronger than it should. You nearly grab a sweet rice dumpling, but the seller's eyeing you too hard. You move on. Historians still argue whether these rural markets acted as true economic lifelines or more as social glue. The answer is likely both. While they were essential for trade, they also gave people like you rare chances to hear news, see unfamiliar faces, and briefly feel part of something larger than your rice paddy. You overhear snippets of gossip as you move through the stalls. They say the tax will rise again. A bandit took a whole cart on the North Road. I heard the shogun's wife grew horns, real ones. You nod politely, like you're hearing weather reports. Some of it might be true. Most probably isn't. But you file it away. Every joke or exaggeration contains a kernel of fear, and fear is just another kind of weather here. A group of low-ranking samurai lingers near a tea vendor, half drunk and loud. One of them kicks over a basket of daikon with a laugh. No one intervenes. No one dares. You keep your head down and slide sideways out of their sight. Discretion is your armor, and you wear it well. Just as you're about to leave, the rain lets up. The clouds shift like a blanket being pulled away, revealing a sliver of pale blue. The mood changes subtly. People move a little faster. Sellers shout louder. The paper charm boy declares his product now waterproof. On the walk home, your basket's lighter but more useful. You glance at the salt wrapped tightly in leaves and smile. It might last 2 weeks if you're careful. 3, if nobody gets greedy with their soup. Back in your village, you wash your feet in a cold basin and peel off your soaked outer layer. Your mother's boiling barley again. She eyes your bundle and nods with a soft grunt of approval. You eat in silence, watching the steam rise in lazy tendrils, the scent of miso filling the small room. Your brother is still outside chasing frogs with a stick, and your father's patching a leak in the roof by candlelight. No one speaks of the samurai at the market, or the rising taxes, or the crooked tea seller, but you all know it's in the way your father hammers the roof just a little harder. Later, you tuck the paper charm into the rafters, just in case. You don't believe in luck, but it doesn't hurt to make room for it, and you sleep well tonight, strangely enough. Not because the world's easier, but because for one day, you traded your labor for something small and solid. Salt, thread, knowledge, a charm against weather, human and otherwise. The field is all knees today, wheat waving in the morning, breeze like a restless crowd trying to stand up and leave early. You stretch your arms, brush off a stray cricket, and mentally brace for another long day in the paddies. Except, you're not heading to the fields. Today, you're making paper. Mainstream fact, paper in feudal Japan wasn't just for writing. It was woven into walls, folded into rituals, made into umbrellas, fans, armor padding, and even clothing linings. Called washi, this handmade paper was tougher and more flexible than its Western counterpart, thanks to the use of fibers from mulberry trees, gampi, or mitsumata shrubs. Your village isn't a major producer, but there's a nearby hamlet that sends for extra hands every few weeks. Lucky you. You've been summoned, meaning you get to spend your day waist deep in cool water, coaxing sticky pulp into perfect sheets. The work starts with the bark. You begin by stripping slender branches of kozo, the paper mulberry. It's a woody plant that peels like sunburnt skin. The outer bark's removed and saved for kindling. The inner bark, pale and stringy, gets boiled into submission for hours until it's soft enough to mash into pulp. You do a lot of mashing. Quirky tidbit. Some villagers believe that angry or impure thoughts during papermaking would curse the batch, making it tear too easily or wrinkle. So yes, you're encouraged to smile serenely while elbow deep in goop. And if you feel cranky, you're told to go sweep something until the negativity clears. The fibers float in wide wooden vats like ghost jellyfish. You stir slowly with a wooden frame called a sew. The trick is rhythm. Scoop, lift, swish, drain, again and again. You're aiming for even layers, just thick enough to hold, just thin enough to dry without curling like angry parchment. It's peaceful work, almost meditative. Your arms ache, your hands go numb from cold water, and your nose tickles from the faint sour smell of fermented pulp. But there's beauty in it, in watching water drain away to reveal something new, in holding a sheet of paper so perfect, so delicate, that it seems to glow. Someone sneezes into a vat. Everyone groans. That batch is done for. Historians still argue whether papermaking spread to Japan from Korea or China first, but it's agreed that the Japanese took the craft and elevated it, turning paper into a cultural art form. Calligraphy, screen paintings, origami, ceremonial decorations. They all rely on the strength and subtlety of washi. At lunch, you sit near a hanging strand of drying paper and chew cold rice while watching the fibers shimmer like dragonfly wings. The master papermaker, an older man with a permanently damp beard, tells you that each sheet takes about 100 careful motions to make. You believe him. Your shoulders already do. A merchant from town comes to inspect a fresh batch. He touches each sheet with the back of his hand, like he's petting a cat he doesn't trust. He smells the paper. Yes, smells it. Then he leaves. Doesn't buy a thing. The master grumbles something about samurai wanting paper softer than their egos. You smirk, but carefully. Humor here is dry as kindling and twice as likely to burn you. In the afternoon, you try your hand at decorative washi, mixing in pressed flowers, tinted dyes, or flecks of mica. It's harder than it looks. One slip, and the sheet bubbles or tears. You produce something that looks like a floral accident. The woman next to you nods encouragingly. "It's honest," she says. You decide to take that as a compliment. A sudden gust of wind knocks half a drying strand into the dirt. There's shouting. There's blaming. There's a brief debate about which kami might be responsible. Eventually, the youngest apprentice is told to fetch tea, which seems to solve everything. Not the paper, but the mood. As the sun begins to slant low, your hands are pruny and your knees crack like thin ice, but you've made something, not a crop to harvest, not a ditch to drain, but objects of intention. Blank spaces waiting for brush strokes, folded wishes, or the soft snap of a fan on a summer night. You tuck a small sheet into your sleeve. It's imperfect, slightly creased at one edge, but it's yours, a souvenir of patience. On the walk home, your fingers still smell faintly of wet bark. You pass a boy carrying a new kite made from washi and bamboo. He grins and runs ahead, trying to catch a breeze that doesn't. Want to be caught. You watch as the kite stutters upward, dips, then rises again, carrying your day with it into the fading sky. It's still dark when you wake. Not sunrise dark. Not lazy mist over the hills dark. Just plain black, like the world forgot to load its background. Somewhere, a frog croaks. Then a chicken, clearly misled, chimes in, and the first hints of pale blue edge across the sky. You sit up on your mat, bones creaking like old wood. You've got one job today: wood, specifically firewood. Mainstream fact: in feudal Japan, firewood wasn't just fuel, it was survival. Used for cooking, heating, boiling water, brewing sake, preparing dyes, metalwork, you name it. Villages without good wood access either bartered for bundles or sent people into the mountains to gather what they could. Managing wood supply was so vital that some domains had specific forestry laws about who could cut, when, and how much. Your family's been burning damp bark for a week, and your mother's had enough of coughing up campfire smoke. So today, you're hauling yourself into the forest, hatchet in hand, to gather enough dry kindling and small branches to restock your household pile. You don't go alone. There's a woodcutting group, a rotating bunch of villagers who know the trails, the tree types, and how to tell a sleeping boar from a rock, hopefully. You join the tail end, yawning and pulling your outer robe tighter against the dawn chill. The path into the woods is steep. Mud turns to moss and dry leaf. Crunch gives way to the occasional squish where water still hides beneath ferns. The deeper you go, the quieter things get, until you can hear each other's breathing and the distant rhythmic thud of a woodpecker doing his version of a construction project. The oldest in your group, Hajime-san, who smells like pine and vinegar, leads the way. He stops occasionally, pokes a fallen branch, and nods like it told him a secret. You gather sticks first. Easy stuff, lighter bundles that can dry quickly in the sun back home. Then thicker limbs. Then, if you're unlucky, and you usually are, someone decides you need logs. Real ones. Quirky tidbit. In some mountainous regions, villagers used elaborate sled-like contraptions to drag heavy wood down slopes, sometimes sitting on top of the load for the ride. It was wildly unsafe, often entertaining, and generally frowned upon by sober adults. You opt for dragging by rope. It's slow. It's muddy. Your arms feel like noodles by mid-morning. The forest itself, though, is beautiful in a way you almost forget to notice. Shafts of light fall like golden arrows through the canopy. Spiderwebs glisten on the underbrush. A startled pheasant explodes out of a bush with all the grace of a startled broom. You nearly drop your bundle. Hajime-san chuckles. That bird's smarter than you. At least it runs away from work. You grunt. Fair. By mid-morning, your sleeves are streaked in sap and your back is barking. You've learned more about tree types than you ever cared to. Cedar burns hot, pine smells good but spits, and some mysterious blackwood tree called kuramatsu is for fancy people, which you definitely are not. Historians still argue whether firewood scarcity in certain regions influenced local food styles, more boiling and fermenting, less grilling. Some researchers claim wood supply even shaped architectural designs as homes became more efficient in heat conservation. One way or another, the humble branch shaped daily life more than most people realize. You break for a short lunch, rice balls with pickled plum, shared in silence. Someone whistles a tune from a no play, badly, and is promptly told to chew instead. The forest hums around you. Somewhere, a cicada starts early. You take it as your cue to move. The walk back is worse than the climb up. Gravity's no friend when you've got a bundle of wood tied to your shoulders with fraying rope. Your legs slip more than once, and by the time you reach the village border, your arms feel about as attached as your will to live. You unload your pile near the house and collapse beside it like an extra log. Your mother steps out, eyes the wood with approval, and hands you a ladle of barley tea without a word. You sit on the step, sipping slowly as the smoke from a neighbor's chimney curls upward into the afternoon haze. Someone's burning pine. You can smell it. That evening, your fingers still sticky with resin, you take a moment to sharpen your little hatchet by lamplight. You don't know why. Maybe it's just something to do with your hands while your muscles recover. Maybe part of you is proud. You may not have wielded a sword, built a temple, or written poetry in gold ink, but you gathered something necessary. You turned effort into heat, sweat into survival. And tomorrow, when the stew simmers without complaint and the air smells only faintly of fire, you'll remember today every time the kettle sings, even if your arms still hurt when it does. The smell hits first. Not bad exactly, just unforgettable. A sharp blend of fermented something, charred something else, and that damp earth scent you now associate with long hours and tired hands. Your feet carry you forward anyway, because today you're helping with what can only be described as the most complicated boiling process in human history. You've been recruited for soy sauce duty. Mainstream fact: soy sauce, shoyu, in feudal Japan was no casual condiment. It was the result of months, sometimes years, of fermentation, involving carefully prepared soybeans, roasted wheat, salt water, and a particular mold called koji. Families and small guilds produced it in batches that had to be stirred, watched, sung to, in some places, and stored with more attention than a samurai's armor. You arrive at the brewing shed, a low building that smells like centuries of bubbling secrets. Inside, the air is thick, humid, and warm. Barrels, big enough to sleep in, line the walls, each covered with cloth and tied tight with rope. There's a faint burble beneath the silence, like the soybeans themselves are whispering to one another. Your job? Stirring. You're handed a ladle nearly as tall as you and shown a barrel labelled Batch, Late Spring. The liquid inside is dark, syrupy, and bubbling with what you hope is fermentation and not some new form of life. You stir, slowly, methodically, watching the top swirl into lazy spirals. It's hypnotic. It's also exhausting. 10 stirs, and your arms already want to unionize. Quirky tidbit. In some villages, it was believed that women on their menstrual cycle shouldn't participate in koji fermentation, lest their unbalanced humors spoil the batch. While there's no scientific proof of this, it's one of many odd taboos that crept into artisanal food practices. You're not sure what to make of it, but you do make sure to keep your humors as balanced as possible, just in case. The head brewer, a man with eyebrows like sleepy caterpillars, inspects your stirring. He nods once. That's high praise in these parts. He then explains the fermentation process in slow, reverent tones, as though describing a ritual, not a recipe. First, the soybeans are steamed until soft, then mixed with crushed roasted wheat. Koji mold spores are dusted in like holy powder. The mixture rests in warmth, slowly developing enzymes. Days later, the mash, called moromi, is packed into barrels with brine and stirred regularly over the coming months. Some barrels ferment up to 2 years. 2 years. You mentally file this under reasons why I will never complain about waiting for toast again. Historians still argue whether soy sauce's rise in Japan came directly through Buddhist vegetarian cooking or as a product of China's influence on Japanese taste and trade. Either way, by the Edo period, shoyu had become a staple, used in everything from soups and stews to pickling and preserving. And the good stuff? It was practically currency. Some taxes were even paid in high-quality soy sauce. You pause your stirring to stretch your back. The brewer lets you sample a bit from a nearly finished batch. He dips a slender ladle into the barrel and offers a drop on a bamboo spoon. You taste it cautiously. It's salty, yes, but rich, deep. Like miso and mushrooms had a philosophical conversation in your mouth. You nod, eyebrows high. The brewer smiles. You think he just adopted you. You're given the slightly less glamorous task of scrubbing out one of the older barrels. Inside, remnants of past batches cling like memories. You scrape carefully, using cloth, water, and a paste made from ground rice husks. It smells stronger in here. You get woozy once or twice and are told to breathe through your mouth, not your soul. Helpful advice. Later you help pack a fresh barrel. The mix is warm and thick and just a little alive. It squishes between your fingers as you push it down into the brine. You tie the cloth cover tight and mark the date on a small wooden tag. A year from now, someone will taste your effort and not know your name. That thought is oddly comforting. As the day fades, the brewing room quiets. The barrels sit in patient rows, humming their microbial lullaby. The brewer thanks you in his own way, a quiet nod, a bowl of pickled vegetables, and a small jar of last year's shoyu to take home. It's not fancy, it's not wrapped, but it's the best gift you've received all month. You walk back with the little jar wrapped in cloth and tucked into your sash like treasure. You know your mother will stretch it for weeks, adding just a drop to stews, soups, and rice to make everything taste like effort, time, and stories passed hand to hand. When you finally sit down to dinner, the food is simple. Just millet, greens, and a slice of grilled tofu. But someone adds a dab of shoyu from your jar, and suddenly it tastes like a feast. You wake up to the sound of chanting. Not loud, just rhythmic. Low and measured, like waves lapping at a stone wall. You blink, stretch, and sit up slowly, realizing the sound is coming from the temple. Again. That's your first hint that today won't involve paddies or pots or firewood. You've been assigned to help at the local shrine. Mainstream fact: shrines and temples were more than religious sites in feudal Japan. They were community centers, schools, gathering spaces, and, at times, emergency shelters. Shinto shrines housed kami, spirits connected to nature and objects, while Buddhist temples focused more on enlightenment, discipline, and letting go of earthly desires, like decent shoes, apparently. You're not thrilled about the assignment, not because you dislike the temple, it's peaceful enough, but because the monks tend to make you scrub everything. Floors, altars, sandals, statues. And it's all done in silence. Even your sighs echo. You arrive barefoot, as required, and bow before stepping onto the temple grounds. The air here smells different. Older, quieter. Maybe it's the incense, maybe the moss that grows over every stone, or maybe it's just the feeling of people trying not to think loudly. The head monk, eyes like closed windows, gives you a broom and gestures toward the outer corridor. You begin sweeping, and sweeping, and sweeping. Then you sweep some more. Quirky tidbit. Temple brooms were often handmade from bundled twigs tied to a bamboo shaft. They were considered sacred tools, and in some regions, you had to bow before picking one up. It was believed that even cleaning could be a spiritual act, removing dust from the soul as well as from the floor. You try to think of it that way while extracting a stubborn leaf from between two planks. Dust from the soul, you mutter, flicking a spider off your foot. Inside the temple, monks chant sutras in a language you don't understand but feel in your ribs. Their robes rustle like quiet waterfalls as they move. A bell rings, deep, round, slow. It vibrates through the air like warm honey. The head monk pauses his sweeping and gestures you over. He hands you a cloth and points to a statue of Kannon, the bodhisattva of compassion. You are to clean her. Gently, you bow instinctively and climb the short steps. The statue's face is serene, carved from wood, worn smooth by time and weather, and possibly the wishes of 100 villagers. Her many arms curl around her, like tree branches mid-embrace. You begin to wipe, carefully tracing the folds of her robe, the calm curve of her cheek. It's the quietest you've been all week. Historians still argue whether the coexistence of Buddhism and Shintoism in feudal Japan was peaceful synergy or political compromise. Either way, the average villager didn't stress about it. You prayed to whichever spirit was relevant. Rice, kami for the harvest, Buddha for your sick uncle, and Kannon when you just needed someone to listen. Around midday, you help prepare food offerings. The monks eat simply: steamed rice, pickled daikon, maybe some miso if it's a special day. You wash bowls, cut root vegetables, and arrange tiny portions onto bamboo trays. No garlic, no meat, no excitement, just balance and humility. Before eating, the monks chant a grace in near whisper. You sit at the far end, trying not to slurp. A sparrow lands on the railing behind you. You both chew in silence. After lunch, there's bell duty. You're handed a rope connected to the great bronze temple bell, a hulking thing suspended like a sleeping dragon. You're shown how to pull the beam gently, then release. The bell's sound is less a ring than a thrum, a note that seems to last longer than your attention span. It's rung to mark the hour, the ritual, or the turning of the world. Or maybe just because it feels good to shake the air. Quirky belief. Some temples rang their bells times on New Year's Eve to symbolize the cleansing of earthly desires, like envy, sloth, pride, and wanting to lie down in the dirt right now, because sweeping has destroyed your will to live. As you coil the rope again, a junior monk thanks you with a rare smile. He hands you a small slip of paper, a omikuji, a fortune. You're told to read it at home, not here. That way, the kami won't get cocky. As the day winds down, you help extinguish the incense. Smoke curls in delicate spirals, dissolving into the air. The monks chant once more, then fall into stillness. You bow, Return your broom and step off the sacred grounds backwards, as instructed. Walking home, you unfold the fortune slip. It says, "Even a bent tree finds sunlight." You don't fully know what it means, but you smile anyway. When you reach home, your mother asks what you did all day. You tell her, "I cleaned a goddess's cheek, I rang a dragon bell, and I made soup for men who never talk." She nods like, "This all sounds perfectly normal." You go to sleep that night with the faint scent of incense in your hair, the phrase "dust of the soul" echoing somewhere behind your eyes, and a strange feeling that for once, the world didn't need you to hustle. It just needed you to listen. You're back in the mud. Not the good kind of mud either. The squishy, warm, between your toes garden kind. This is the cold, squelching, boot-eating kind that clings to your legs like a possessive cat. And today, you're spending the entire day helping reinforce a levee. Mainstream fact: flood control was an essential part of life in feudal Japan. Rice paddies were both a gift and a curse, productive when well watered, devastating when rivers overflowed. Villages often had to work collectively to build and maintain levees, dikes, canals, and diversion systems. It wasn't glamorous, but it was the difference between feast and famine. You didn't exactly volunteer for this job. A village elder saw you yawning too dramatically during breakfast and figured you had extra energy to spend. So now you're knee-deep in riverbank muck, holding a shovel that's too heavy and standing next to a guy named Ichiro who thinks everything needs to be narrated like a kabuki play. "To the left!" he shouts, arms waving as two others push a log into place. "No, your other left." You squint. "We're facing the same direction." "Ah," he says gravely. "Then I mean my emotional left." Quirky tidbit. Some levees weren't just mud and logs. They were reinforced with woven bamboo mats, packed with stones and anchored with willow roots. Certain water divining rituals also took place before a major build. You haven't seen any rituals yet, but you do see a lot of willow branches, and you're fairly sure someone muttered a prayer to the river earlier. Or maybe they were just swearing. Your job is tamping the earth. After a section of wall is packed with clay, you climb up and stomp it flat with wooden Gita sandals that are terrible for balance and dignity. You wobble, flail, and finally land on your back in what might be a small frog's living room. You apologize out loud. Ichiro claps. "Bravo, a perfect dismount." You groan. The elder supervising the build walks past, his robe tucked in two, his sash, hands behind his back like he's contemplating the meaning of rocks. "Good progress," he says. "If we get this done before the next rain, your fields will stay dry. If not, well." He doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. You look at the river. It's low now, trickling lazily between reed-choked banks. But the storm clouds gathering on the horizon make it clear. Water is patient, but not polite. Historians still argue whether Japan's early irrigation systems were adapted from Chinese designs or developed locally in response to the island's unique geography. Either way, it's clear that collective engineering was central to survival. Whole towns collaborated on these projects, not because they wanted to, but because not doing it meant losing everything. You take a break in the shade of a cart loaded with sandbags. Your legs are coated in brown, your hands blistered, and your back twinges every time you breathe too confidently. Someone hands you a rice cake. You inhale it without even tasting. Ichiro sits beside you, still cheerful, still somehow clean. "I heard once," he says, "that if you build a perfect levee, the river will whisper your name at night." You raise an eyebrow. Do you want it to whisper your name? Only if it uses the honorifics. Break's over. You're back at it, hauling logs this time. Thick, wet things that smell like swamp and sweat. You wedge one into a fresh gap in the levee, wedge it tight with clay and stones. The mud sucks at your sandals like it's trying to keep you for later. There's a sudden shout. Someone's slipped downstream. You rush over with two others and pull them out. Nothing broken, just bruised pride and a soaked robe. You help them to the fire pit, where steam begins to rise from their sleeves like a defeated teapot. Later, when the final tamping is done and the levee's spine looks strong and stubborn, everyone stands back in silence. There's no ceremony, no speeches, just a shared glance at the river and the nod of the elder. It will hold. For now. You walk home barefoot, carrying your sandals, in one hand and a vague sense of accomplishment in the other. You pass by the fields, your fields, and see the small ridges of earth that separate one paddy from another. They look so fragile from here, so easy to flood, to drown, to ruin. And yet they persist, just like you. That night, you soak your feet in warm water and watch the rain begin to fall, slow at first, then steadier. You listen carefully, half expecting the river to whisper a name through the downpour. But all you hear is water, falling, flowing, and, for now, staying where it should. You wake to the sound of scratching, not from a rodent, at least you hope not, but from your neighbor, pulling a bamboo rake across dry dirt. Today is not for rice or soy or river taming. Today is for something altogether pricklier: fieldweeds and mountain herbs. Mainstream fact: in feudal Japan, most families supplemented their diets by foraging edible plants, roots, and herbs, especially in spring and early summer before the rice harvest came in. These wild greens were called sansai, mountain vegetables, and they weren't just backup food. They were cherished seasonal staples, full of flavor, folklore, and more than a few surprise side effects if you picked wrong. You start the day with a woven basket slung over your back, a knife tucked into your sash, and a lecture from your aunt about not touching anything with thorns, 5-pointed leaves, or that smells like fear. You nod solemnly. The group sets out at sunrise, climbing narrow trails into the foothills. You pass groves of cedar, soft paths lined with moss, and the occasional scuttling lizard who clearly wants nothing to do with your quest. The air is crisp, filled with birdsong and that damp, piney scent that always makes you feel like you're in a scroll painting. Quirky tidbit: some villagers believed warabi, a common fiddlehead fern, could only be harvested by those with gentle hands. If you rushed it or broke the stems improperly, the plant would sulk and not grow back the next year. You're trying to be gentle, but you did just stab a burdock root with more aggression than necessary, so maybe you've already offended something. The basket on your back begins to fill slowly. Fern tips, wild ginger, sprigs of mugwort, and the elusive udo, a white, fragrant shoot that tastes like mild celery, had a nap in lemon water. Someone finds a patch of wasabi near a spring, and everyone rushes over like it's buried treasure. You try a nibble. It nearly rearranges your entire face. Auntie laughs so hard she snorts. You were supposed to mix that with rice first. You cough for 5 minutes. Historians still argue whether the reliance on wild foods was purely economic or had deeper ritual significance. Some say the seasonal gathering of sansai was tied to Shinto purity practices and Buddhist appreciation of nature's impermanence. Others say people just wanted something green that didn't taste like stored barley. Back in the village, the herbs are rinsed in big wooden tubs. You help chop, boil, and pickle them for preservation. The kitchen smells like someone opened a spice drawer in the woods. It's chaotic, fragrant, and full of shouting. A toddler sneezes into a basket of siri, and someone mutters a prayer for the survival of dinner. You're given the honorable task of pounding sansho, Japanese pepper, using a mortar and pestle. The tiny green berries release a citrusy aroma that tickles your nose and numbs your lips. You're told to stop licking the pestle. Lunch is simple but heavenly. Mountain greens sautéed with miso, a bowl of millet rice, and a few pickled shoots so sour your teeth sing. You eat under the eaves while rain drizzles softly, your hands still green-stained and your sleeves smelling like wild onions. Later, someone pulls out an emaki, a painted scroll, and unrolls a scene of seasonal plants. You're challenged to name them. You get most right, then confidently point to one and say, "That's obviously yomogi." It's a toad. Evening comes with tea brewed from roasted barley and sweet potato scraps. Someone adds a pinch of dried shiso leaves, and the whole room smells like purple basil and memories. It's one of those small comforts you don't notice until it's gone. You're told to dry the leftover herbs in the attic rafters. The bundles sway in the breeze like green wind chimes. You hang the last one, Fuki no To, a bitter bud with a bite like old gossip, and climb down the ladder slowly, breathing in the scent of 10 tiny forests. Before sleep, your aunt hands you a small cloth pouch. For dreams, she says. Inside is a bundle of crushed Kakitsubata iris petals and mugwort, meant to ward off nightmares and summon soft visions. You tuck it under your straw pillow, wondering what sort of dreams smell like fresh mountain soil and slightly overcooked fiddleheads. As you drift off, your muscles ache in that clean, used-up way. Your fingers are stained green, your hair smells like rain, and your lips are still tingling from the Sancho pepper. The mountain fed you today. Not just your belly, but something quieter, deeper, something that hums in the bones when the world is still and the fire is low. You're on your feet before dawn, not because you're a morning person, but because today is market day, a rare, bustling, slightly chaotic break from the slow pulse of village life. You trudge along the dusty road with a basket of dried herbs and a few freshly picked vegetables, heading toward the nearest town, where vendors hawk everything from pottery to pickled fish. Mainstream fact: markets in feudal Japan weren't just places to buy and sell goods. They were vital social hubs where news, gossip, and rumors traveled faster than any courier. Merchants and peasants, samurai and monks might cross paths in a swirl of languages, dialects, and bargaining. Market days often followed a calendar linked to temple festivals or seasonal cycles. You arrive just as the sun brushes the rooftops, gold. The street is already alive with the clatter of wooden carts, the shouts of vendors, and the scent of grilling fish mixed with incense from a nearby shrine. Lanterns still hang, bobbing gently in the morning breeze, their paper sides glowing, faintly. Your first stop is a stall selling senbei, crispy rice crackers flavored with soy sauce. You try to convince the vendor to let you trade some herbs for a few crackers, but he's stubborn. Apparently, herbs are good for the soul, but not enough to satisfy my stomach. Fair enough. Quirky tidbit. Some market stalls specialized in selling lucky charms, talismans, and even tiny wooden carvings said to bring fortune or ward off evil spirits. You spot a vendor offering miniature Daruma dolls painted with half-finished eyes. Customers buy one and paint the other eye once a wish is fulfilled. It's kind of like low-tech Kickstarter goals, but with way more incense. You weave through the crowd, careful not to bump into the samurai riding past on horseback. Because even in a busy market, their horses don't negotiate. You feel the thud of hooves in your chest and move aside with a respectful bow. You catch a glimpse of their armor glinting in the sun, and a hint of nervousness flickers in your gut. Remember, in feudal Japan, samurai could literally end your market day if you offended them. Historians still argue whether market days helped bridge the rigid class divides or only reinforced them with public spectacle and strict etiquette. Either way, everyone had to know their place or face serious consequences. At a cloth stall, you run your fingers over bolts of indigo-dyed fabric, marveling at the deep blue that seems to hold entire oceans in its folds. You consider buying, some to patch your threadbare kimono, but decide that rice and miso come first. Nearby, an elderly storyteller gathers a small crowd to recount tales of heroic warriors and mischievous fox spirits. His voice is low and rhythmic, weaving images of glowing eyes in the forest and clever kitsune outsmarting arrogant samurai. You listen, entranced, the world narrowing down to just his words and the murmurs of the crowd. Suddenly, the shrill cry of a merchant advertising fresh tofu breaks the spell. The crowd disperses like a breeze scattering petals, and you find yourself holding a small bundle of silk thread, your purchase for the day, and a head full of stories. You make your way home as the sun climbs higher, the weight of the day settling on your shoulders like a comfortable shawl. Market day might be tiring, noisy, and a little overwhelming, but it's also a reminder that even in strict, hierarchical feudal Japan, people found ways to come together, to laugh, to barter, and maybe, just maybe, to dream. You're crouched by a hearth that's more smoke than flame. Today is about fire and forging, But not in the way you'd expect. You're not making swords or armor. You're helping a village blacksmith craft tools and simple household goods, things that shape daily life quietly, without the drama of battle or ceremony. Mainstream fact: blacksmiths in feudal Japan were highly respected craftsmen, and their work ranged from swords to farming implements. Their furnaces, or tatara, burned fiercely with charcoal made from oak or chestnut, reaching temperatures hot enough to melt iron. Though sword making is famous, village smiths mostly focused on practical tools like sickles, knives, and nails. You sit on a rough log beside the forge, watching the smith, a broad-shouldered man with soot-smeared clothes and a grin that's as sharp as his hammer, shape a glowing piece of metal. Sparks fly like tiny stars as he pounds, the rhythmic clang echoing through the workshop. Quirky tidbit: some smiths believed their tools carried a spirit, a kami, and treated them with rituals before and after crafting. You see a small altar in the corner, candles flickering beside a carved wooden horse figurine, supposedly a patron of smiths and travelers. The smith tosses a pinch of salt into the fire, muttering something you don't quite catch. You're handed a bellows and told to keep the fire breathing. You pump steadily, feeling the heat lick your face, the leather straps chafing your wrists. The smell of burning charcoal mixes with sweat and hot metal, a scent that feels oddly comforting after a day in the fields or forests. Historians still argue whether village blacksmiths' secret techniques influenced the famous swordsmith schools or developed independently in isolation. Regardless, their skill was indispensable, not just for war, but for daily survival. The smith hands you a half-formed sickle blade. "Finish shaping it," he says. You take the hammer, awkwardly but determinedly, and tap carefully. The metal resists, then yields under your touch, warm and alive. You're not sure if it's artistry or accident, but the blade takes shape. When it cools, it's sharp enough to slice through bamboo stalks, which you test outside with a mixture of pride and surprise. You spend the afternoon polishing nails, shaping hooks, and stacking finished tools on shelves. The workshop is cluttered but alive, a sanctuary of creation and heat in a world often cold and unyielding. By evening, your arms ache pleasantly. The smith nods approvingly and shares a flask of sake, a modest celebration of a day's work well done. The warmth spreads through you, mingling with the soot on your skin. As darkness settles, you leave, the forge behind, carrying a small iron hook as a gift. It feels heavier than it looks, a reminder that even the smallest tool can hold meaning and power. Outside, the stars blink awake, silent witnesses to centuries of craft and care. You wonder if those stars ever watched a smith hammering out a blade like yours, simple, strong, and full of quiet promise. You wake to the distant clatter of hooves and voices carried by morning mist. Today you're drawn into the world of messengers and communication, a crucial but often overlooked part of feudal Japan's vast, layered bureaucracy. You're not a samurai, but you'll carry messages through the winding mountain paths, a role fraught with both honor and danger. Mainstream fact: the hikyaku were specialized couriers who relayed letters and documents across feudal domains. They traveled by foot or horseback, navigating difficult terrain to keep lords informed. Speed and discretion were vital, and many couriers were skilled in survival, disguise, and even minor combat. Your instructions are simple: carry a sealed letter to a nearby castle, about 30 kilometers away. The letter is heavy with the weight of alliances and rivalries you don't fully understand, but your responsibility is clear. You tighten the straps of your pack and begin. The path climbs steeply, slicing through groves of bamboo and past tranquil mountain shrines where you pause to bow and offer a quick prayer for safe passage. Quirky tidbit: some hikyaku used coded messages hidden in poems or woven into fabric patterns. You overhear a merchant whisper about a courier who once carried a secret message sewn into the hem of his kimono, though whether that's legend or fact is a matter for local gossip. The road is rough, slick with early morning dew. You slip, once, catch yourself with a grunt, and laugh softly at your own clumsiness. The forest around you is alive with birdsong and the faint rustle of deer in underbrush. It's peaceful, but you know better than to let your guard down. Historians still argue whether the courier networks were primarily state-controlled or loosely organized by local lords. Either way, their efficiency was crucial in times of war, when messages could mean the difference between victory and disaster. As you near the castle gates, the sun breaks through clouds, casting a golden glow on stone walls and fluttering banners. A guard eyes you suspiciously but relaxes when you show the sealed letter and bow deeply. You hand over the message, the moment heavy with unspoken tension. Then you turn and begin your journey back, lighter now, but aware the path ahead is just as demanding. The castle fades behind you as the day warms. You think about the invisible threads connecting distant places, letters that carry hopes, threats, and plans beyond your knowing. For a moment, you imagine yourself as a line stretching through time, linking past and future with every step. The mountain wind whispers in your ear, carrying secrets you'll never hear. It's still dark when you wake, not to the usual chirping of birds, but the faint, steady sound of chanting. You step outside and see lanterns flickering in the mist, casting long shadows across the path. Today, you're joining a pilgrimage to a mountain temple, a long, contemplative walk with a few blisters, many chants, and perhaps a bit of enlightenment if you don't twist your ankle on the way. Mainstream fact: pilgrimages were common in feudal Japan, undertaken by peasants, nobles, monks, and everyone in between. Famous routes like the Kumano Kodo connected remote shrines and temples. Pilgrims walked for weeks or even months seeking blessings, health, or forgiveness. You've tied on your best traveling sandals and secured your straw hat. A walking stick is thrust into your hand, carved with worn sutras. You fall in line behind a quiet cluster of fellow pilgrims, all moving in the same slow, determined rhythm. There's something oddly comforting about it, like joining the breath of a larger creature. Quirky tidbit: some pilgrims wore white burial robes during these journeys, symbolizing that they were leaving behind their earthly selves, ready, if necessary, to die on the path. You're not quite there spiritually, but your socks are already halfway dead from damp trail mud. The trail winds uphill, past small stone statues of Jizzo, guardian of travelers and children. Each one has a red bib tied around its neck, and you pause to add a pebble beside one, a traditional offering. The path is lined with cedar and pine, the air cool and thick with incense, carried from a shrine downwind. Around midday, the group stops near a waystation temple. A monk offers simple food, boiled rice, pickled vegetables, and warm tea. It's nothing fancy, but you swear it tastes better than anything you've eaten in weeks. Hunger will do that. Historians still argue whether these pilgrimages were deeply religious or more about escape, an excuse for peasants to legally leave their villages, even if just temporarily. Some temples welcomed thousands of visitors during festival seasons, creating miniature markets, performances, and impromptu reunions among travelers. As you continue, the climb steepens. Your legs protest with every step, and your mind drifts into a quiet fog of breath, pain, and rhythm. You chant along softly with the group, the words old and worn smooth from centuries of repetition. Even if you don't understand every syllable, they hum in your chest like a heartbeat. At one curve in the trail, you spot a worn signpost carved with a lotus flower. The pilgrim ahead of you turns and grins. Halfway. You're not sure whether to laugh or cry. As the sun begins its descent, the path opens to a plateau. There it is, a weathered mountain temple, its roof curved like the wings of a resting bird. 1,000 paper streamers dance in the wind, and the scent of sandalwood reaches you even before the bell rings. You wash your hands at the stone basin, bow twice, clap once, and offer your small coin at the altar. You close your eyes. You don't ask for anything specific, just a quiet mind, maybe fewer foot blisters. As evening falls, the pilgrims sit together beneath paper lanterns, sipping broth and resting sore muscles. The talk is low and scattered, shared aches, shared wonder, shared silence. You lie down beneath a straw mat roof, wrapped in borrowed blankets, the wind whispering through the rafters. The temple bell tolls once, low and deep, like a voice remembering something sacred. You're exhausted, sore, and strangely at peace. It turns out the road isn't just the way to the temple, it is the temple. You're woken by something you haven't heard in weeks. Absolute silence. Not the quiet of the forest or the stillness of dawn, but the kind that presses into your ears like soft wool. Today, you've reached a remote mountain monastery, a place where speech is a choice, not a habit, and where daily life moves in cycles of stillness, ritual, and tea. Mainstream fact: Buddhist monasteries in feudal Japan were spiritual sanctuaries, but also centers of education, manuscript preservation, and political influence. Many followed Zen principles, emphasizing meditation, discipline, and simplicity. Others, like those in the Tendai or Shingon sects, leaned more toward esoteric rituals, sutra recitation, and scholarly practice. You're not officially a monk, of course, but travelers are often welcomed, especially if they're willing to help out. So you're shown to a small chamber with tatami floors and told, with a gentle nod, that breakfast is served after the morning bell. Until then, silence. You sit cross-legged and wait, and think about everything and nothing, mostly your sore knees. Finally, the bell rings. You follow the robed monks in a single-file line to the zendo, or meditation hall. There, simple bowls of rice gruel and pickled radish await. No one talks. No one slurps. You eat slowly, aware of every bite. It's somehow both bland and perfect. Quirky tidbit: some Zen monks practiced takuhatsu. Ritual begging walks through towns wearing wide hats that covered their faces. The practice wasn't just about receiving food. It was a spiritual offering of presence, humility, and reminder that even monks relied on the kindness of others. You're invited to join the morning meditation. The monk beside you taps a wooden block 3 times. Everyone bows and turns toward the wall. You follow, heart thudding. It begins. You count your breaths, then lose track. You adjust your posture, then try not to fidget. A mosquito buzzes past your ear like a tiny chainsaw, and you debate the karmic implications of swatting it. Eventually, you stop trying so hard. You breathe. You sit. Historians still argue whether Zen's growing popularity in the Kamakura period was purely spiritual or a response to the rising warrior class's need for focused discipline. Samurai often trained at Zen temples to cultivate mental resilience, because if you're going to get your arms sliced off in battle, you might as well be at peace with it. When the meditation ends, you feel not enlightened exactly, but clearer, like your thoughts have been gently wrung out and laid flat to dry. You help in the garden next, pulling weeds, pruning plum trees, sweeping moss-covered stones. No one tells you what to do, but somehow you know. The rhythm carries you. Later, you're invited to a tea ceremony, formal, deliberate, almost dreamlike. The monk hosting it moves with such calm precision, it's like watching a slow ripple on a pond. You kneel, bow, receive the tea. You sip, grateful, even if your legs fall asleep halfway through. As the sun sets behind pine-covered ridges, the monastery takes on a golden hush. You sit again for evening meditation. This time, your breath feels less like a task and more like a friend. Before bed, you write a single kanji character in the sand of the monastery's rock garden. You write, mu, nothingness. Then you smooth it away. The next morning finds you descending from the mountains, your legs shaky, but your mind unusually still. That peace, however, doesn't last long, because now you're entering a feudal town on market day, a sensory overload of smells, shouts, and the occasional goat nudging your leg. Mainstream fact: markets in feudal Japan, especially in castle towns or jokomachi, were bustling centers of trade, gossip, and cultural exchange. Merchants were technically lower on the social ladder, yet their economic power often gave them more day-to-day influence than peasants, or even some lower-ranking samurai. You shuffle into town through a gate flanked by sleepy guards who barely glance your way. Then it hits you: sizzling skewers, sharp spices, fermented fish, sandalwood incense, the unmistakable smell of unwashed humanity, and the metallic tang of fresh coin. It's chaos, and you're in the thick of it. Stalls line the muddy street like patchwork, colourful awnings flapping, vendors hawking everything from dried squid to handmade dolls. A boy runs past holding a carp by the tail. An old woman tries to sell you tooth powder made from burnt oyster shells. You nearly step on a chicken. No one seems to notice or care. Quirky tidbit. In some towns, performers known as sarugaku actors or street illusionists would blend comedy, acrobatics, and masked dance in impromptu shows. You pause to watch a masked monkey do a backflip onto a man's shoulder. The crowd roars. The monkey bows. You wander deeper into the maze, past the tea houses with painted courtesans in upper windows, past smiths pounding iron, past fortune tellers with gravel voices and missing fingers. You stop to try a dango skewer, sweet, sticky rice balls glazed, with soy syrup, and nearly burn your tongue. Historians still argue whether these markets were regulated by daimyo mandates or if they grew organically around trade routes. Either way, they pulsed like hearts, beating with the rhythm of survival, adaptation, and ambition. You spot a group of samurai, strutting through the street with hands on hilts, clearly not shopping. One merchant gives them a wide berth, eyes down. Another rolls his eyes when they pass and mutters something about how swords don't pay for rice. You smile. Your eye catches a stall of paper charms and calligraphy. The elderly vendor offers to write your name in an elegant brush script for a single coin. You agree and watch her steady hand dance across the paper. When she's done, she blows gently to dry the ink and hands it to you. It's beautiful. You tuck it carefully into your sleeve, oddly touched. Then, drawn by a smell like heaven, you drift toward a noodle stall. The broth simmers, full of garlic, miso, and maybe a whisper of pork fat. You slurp it greedily while sitting on a rough stool beside a fisherman who smells like the entire ocean. He nods at you once, which counts, as a full conversation in market terms. By late afternoon, the noise softens, shadows stretch, and stalls begin to pack up. The street performers disappear, the drunkards settle. The samurai, still strutting. You step away from the clamour and lean against a stone wall, sipping the last of your barley tea. The paper charm in your sleeve rustles in the breeze, as if whispering, "You were here. You were part of this." And tomorrow, this same street will bustle again, just as loud, just as vibrant, as if you'd never passed through. But for now, you did, and that's enough. After the clamour of the marketplace, your ears welcome the quiet again. But there's no rest just yet. You've wandered into a new setting, a peasant village deep in rice country, where daily life hums in slow cycles of planting, tending, and surviving. And you? You're about to spend a day as a humble farmhand, ankle deep in mud and humility. Mainstream fact: the majority of Japan's population during the feudal period were peasants, mostly rice farmers. Under the Tokugawa shogunate, rice wasn't just food, it was currency. A daimyo's wealth was measured in koku, the amount of rice needed to feed one man for 1 year, about kilograms. You arrive as the sun crests the hills, greeted by a tangle of chickens and a toothless old man chewing on a twig. He points toward the rice paddies without a word. That's your cue. Soon, your feet squelch into the muddy grid of flooded fields. The smell of wet earth rises, thick and organic. Frogs chirp like gossiping villagers. You're handed a bundle of rice seedlings and shown how to jab them rhythmically into the soft ground. You try. You're slow. By mid-morning, a passing granny has lapped you twice. You catch her smirking. Quirky tidbit: some farmers held elaborate local festivals to honour the Tanakami, or rice field deity. These involved singing, drinking, and dressing, scarecrows like nobles. There are even legends of scarecrows that walk at night, not to scare crows, but to stretch their ancient legs. A young boy working beside you explains all this solemnly, then adds, "One once waved at me, you decide not to investigate further. You break for lunch in a communal hut. Miso soup, daikon, and rice with barley. Everyone shares without fuss. A woman offers you a pickled plum from her lunchcloth. It puckers your entire face. To the great delight of 3 nearby children, historians still argue whether peasant life was uniformly miserable or marked by moments of contentment and autonomy. Some villages operated with surprising independence, managing local disputes, festivals, and even minor tax negotiations without much outside interference. You spend the afternoon clearing irrigation channels, chasing a wayward goat, and patching a leaking roof with palm fibers. Your hands blister, your back twinges. You develop a newfound respect for people who do this every day. But then sunset rolls in, and everything turns gold. The rice paddies reflect the sky like molten mirrors. A heron flaps lazily overhead. A flute plays somewhere, distant and lonesome. You sit on the porch of a farmhouse with your bowl of tea, watching the last of the light slide away behind distant hills. One of the elders joins you, teeth dyed black from betel nut, and tells a story about a fox who turned into a woman to trick a tax collector. You laugh, not sure if you're supposed to. She laughs with you anyway. Later, you sleep on a straw mat beneath a patched roof, the crickets singing back up to the wind through the trees. It's not glamorous, not poetic, but somehow, despite the mud in your ears and the goat nibbling your sleeve, it feels like home just for a night. You wake before dawn again, because in this life, the sun doesn't wait for anyone. But today, instead of heading to the fields or the market, you're drawn by curiosity and perhaps the scent of something smoky in the distance. It leads you to a humble forge and the world of a blacksmith, where fire, iron, and patience shape tools, and the occasional blade. Mainstream fact: in feudal Japan, blacksmiths were essential artisans who crafted not only farming implements and household items but also the revered katana. The process of making a sword could take weeks, involving repeated folding and tempering of steel, symbolic of both strength and spiritual purity. The smithy is low-built, dark, and pulsing with heat. The blacksmith, bare-armed and coated in soot, glances at you, grunts once, then hands you a bellows. No instructions, just that look, like, don't mess this up. You don't, not too badly anyway. As you pump air into the fire, the forge glows a bright, almost holy orange. The smell is intense: charcoal, sweat, iron. Sparks fly as the smith hammers a glowing strip of metal on the anvil, each strike echoing like a heartbeat. The rhythm is mesmerizing. Quirky tidbit: some swordsmiths offered prayers and fasted during the forging process, treating the act as a sacred ritual. One legend tells of a master who wouldn't allow women near his forge during a blade's birth, fearing their presence would soften the steel. Historians and women rightly roll their eyes. You're invited to help with something safer, shaping a hoe. The blacksmith guides your hand as you swing the hammer. It's heavier than it looks, and your arms scream after the third strike. He nods approvingly anyway. That's practically a standing ovation in blacksmith terms. As you cool the shaped metal in water, steam hisses up like a dragon's sigh. The transformation feels magical. You didn't just make something, you bent the world a little. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths were considered true artisans or mere tradespeople in the rigid class hierarchy. Some were venerated, especially swordsmiths, while others were tucked away in villages, known only to locals. Either way, without them, nothing worked. Not swords, not tools, not nails. As the day passes, the forge becomes its own world, a dance of tools, timing, and teamwork. A young apprentice arrives with calloused hands and hopeful eyes. The master barely speaks to him, but you can feel the trust in every small gesture. It's a slow transmission of skill, like fire passing from one coal to the next. Before you leave, the smith hands you a small iron nail. Your work, apparently. It's not quite straight, but it's yours. He shrugs, like it's no big deal. But it is. Outside, the wind feels cool for the first time all day. You look down at the nail still warm in your hand and smile. A reminder that even in a world of swords and warlords, someone has to make the shovel. Someone has to shape the plow. And sometimes, someone has to teach a traveler how to swing a hammer without smashing their own foot. The nail is still in your pocket when you reach your next stop, a provincial castle compound, towering in layers above the town like a stone and timber mountain. It's not the shogun's palace, but it's formidable, moated, and unmistakably built to remind people who's in charge. Mainstream fact: Japanese castles in the feudal era were not just military fortresses. They were administrative centers, symbols of regional power, and the beating hearts of castle towns. Their strategic design included stone walls, narrow staircases, hidden doors, and winding paths meant to confuse attackers and channel them into kill zones. You cross the bridge, half expecting to be turned away. Instead, a tired-looking gate guard waves you through. Maybe it's the heat, or maybe you just don't look threatening enough to worry about. Either way, you're in. Inside the outer bailey, the mood is businesslike. Servants rush between storehouses and stables. Ashigaru foot soldiers spar with wooden staves. Courtiers in stiff robes glide silently through corridors, their faces unreadable. You're directed, rather abruptly, to help in the kitchen, which, honestly, is a relief, because the alternative seems to involve getting hit with a stick. The castle kitchen is enormous and sweaty, a blur of steaming pots and the bark of orders. You peel daikon radish until your hands go numb. Then you slice leeks, stir miso, and nearly knock over a huge pot of rice gruel that has been cooking for what feels like hours. Quirky tidbit: some daimyo employed food tasters, not because poisoning was common, but because paranoia absolutely was. In more than one case, a retainer met their end via unfortunate soup. Ironically, the lords still ate their favorite dishes anyway, even when advised against it. You know, priorities. Eventually, a stern cook sends you to serve trays of food to the lesser samurai, stewed burdock root, pickled plum, a sliver of grilled fish. You bow deeply at each door and avoid eye contact. One young samurai winks at you and takes 2 pickled plums. You say nothing. You don't want to die over fermented fruit. Historians still argue whether castle life was as hierarchical behind closed doors as it appeared outside. Some scholars believe informal relationships and backdoor deals gave certain servants or concubines surprising influence over policy and politics. Others think the rigid roles rarely budged. Later, you're given permission to explore the higher levels of the keep. Carefully. You climb past decorative screens, up steep wooden stairs, past guards who eye your muddy feet and commoner clothes with barely hidden contempt. The view from the top, once you're finally allowed near it, is something else. Rice paddies glisten below like quilted glass. The village looks miniature. The wind flaps a banner from the watchtower bearing the daimyo's crest. 3 stylized leaves in a circle, quietly commanding obedience. You notice something strange. A hidden passage behind a decorative panel. It leads to a cramped corridor sloping downward, probably for emergencies or assassins. You tiptoe down it for a few steps, then think better of it. This is not the time to get stabbed in a secret hallway. Back in the main hall, a group of retainers kneel around a lacquered board. They're playing Go, black and white stones clacking gently onto the grid. You stop to watch. One of them gestures for you to sit and observe, and for a few quiet minutes, strategy and patience take center stage. Eventually, you're dismissed with a bow and a rice cake wrapped in bamboo leaf. A gift. You've survived a full day inside a castle. You step back onto the drawbridge at sunset, watching the torches being lit one by one. It's majestic, yes, but not a place you'd want to stay long. Too many eyes, too many secrets, too many ways to disappear without anyone asking why. You walk on, pocketing the rice cake and that slightly crooked iron nail, like souvenirs from a world that still feels half made of shadow. The final stretch of your journey leads you down a dirt road, far from castle walls and crowded markets. You pass under rustling trees and crumbling stone markers, following the gentle bend of a stream. And there, nestled in a grove of cypress trees, you find it, a quiet shrine and the monks who keep it. Mainstream fact: in feudal Japan, Buddhist temples and Shinto shrines were not just religious centers, they were social hubs, schools, hospitals, and record keepers. Monks sometimes advised lords, tended the sick, or even served as diplomats and scribes. In quieter corners, they simply cultivated stillness. You cross a mossy bridge and step into cool shadows. The shrine rises before you, simple, wooden, weathered. Incense curls lazily from a bronze holder, and somewhere, a wind chime sings with the breeze. You suddenly feel the dust and noise of the last weeks fall away, like a cloak you didn't know you were carrying. A monk greets you with a nod. No words needed. He gestures for you to remove your sandals and step inside the main hall. Tatami, mats, paper lanterns, the distant clunk of a wooden bell. You kneel awkwardly but mimic those around you. A prayer is chanted in low, even tones. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and though you don't understand every word, the rhythm sinks into your chest like a lullaby. Quirky tidbit: some temples kept cats not just for pest control, but as spiritual guardians. One story tells of a monk who claimed his cat could sense dishonest visitors, and would pointedly stare at them until they fled in shame. You catch sight of a temple cat now, curled up under a statue of Cannon, the goddess of mercy. It blinks at you slowly, like it knows. Later, you're invited to join in temple chores, sweeping fallen leaves, helping ladle food, polishing worn wood until it glows. You're slow, but no one minds. There's no rush here. The world will wait. In the garden, a younger monk teaches you the ritual of suisen, or water meditation. You sit near the pond, watching each ripple as if it carries a story. The sky turns peach. A koi fish surfaces, then disappears. You realize you haven't spoken in over an hour. Historians still argue whether rural temples like this influenced political matters, or simply existed apart from them, as sanctuaries of peace. The truth may lie somewhere between, not power centers, but quiet stabilizers, reminding people that not every struggle must be met with steel. Night arrives gently. Paper lanterns cast warm circles of light. The monks gather for a meal: barley rice, tofu stew, pickled vegetables. They eat in near silence, chewing thoughtfully, bowing to each other between bites. You do the same. After dinner, the head monk shares a story. It's about a man who spent his life chasing power, only to find enlightenment when he stopped to help a frog cross a river. You think about frogs, and rice, and swords, and everything you've seen. The monk smiles at you, as if he knows. And, maybe, in this place, he does. Wind down, final words. The air is softer now. A breeze stirs the temple's wind chime, and the last sliver of moonlight reflects off the quiet pond. Your body rests on a straw mat, your limbs finally still. The paper walls glow faintly with candlelight, flickering like distant stars. Everything feels slower, quieter. The world you've walked through, the samurai, the merchants, the farmers, and monks, fades gently behind you like footprints in the fog. It's peaceful here, but not empty. You can still hear the faint hum of the forge, the rustle of the rice fields, the laughter in the market. The past is never really gone. It just sleeps in quiet corners like this, waiting for someone to remember. Your eyes grow heavier with each breath. Thoughts drift, unanchored. Maybe you're back in the shrine garden, or maybe you're following a firefly through a bamboo forest, barefoot and unseen. No more battles to fight, no more lords to serve. Only stillness now, only breath, in and out, soft and slower. You've walked the roads of feudal Japan. You've survived, just barely, and now you can rest. Let the night carry you gently, as it did them. Sleep well, traveler. It's barely, and now you can rest. Let the night carry you gently, as it did them. Sleep well, traveller.